Hey gamers, Taugrim here. This is the 4th episode in the Road to Unicum series. Today we're looking at the T-44. This is a Tier 8 Russian medium tank, and let's talk about its downsides quickly. Two things. One, the silver penetration is a woeful 175, which is the lowest of any medium tank for its tier. And secondly, the placement of the ammo rack makes the tank very vulnerable. This front section of the hull, if you get hit here, you can get your ammo rack damage, which will double your reload times. On the positive side, this tank has three notable strengths. One is that it has really good mobility, both in terms of the top speed and agility. Two, it has a low profile, which can make it harder for tanks to hit you from range. And three, it has good camouflage. Now in this Mines battle, camouflage isn't going to be particularly important because this is a lot of close quarters fighting. And since I am a top tier tank here with good speed, I'm pushing hill immediately. One thing you want to do anytime you cross an open space where there might be potential for incoming fire, you want to turn your turret in that direction, not just to fire at your opponents, but to also make sure not to expose the side of your turret. And you can see here, nobody on their side challenged hill, so I'm able to move up here without taking a scratch. Now what's funny, if you look at the chat, a friendly IS was saying, hey, don't go hill, let's just sit back and let them come. And that reflects very much a passive mindset. One of the things, if you want to push towards deep blue or purple stats, is you have to learn to be smartly aggressive and to create opportunities to deal damage both for yourself as well as your team. The great thing about hill on mines is that you can cover three flanks. I can cover the eastern side of the map, the southern side of the map, and the western side. And unless I choose to expose myself, enemy tanks don't have a shot on me. I come over on this side and spot some tanks. Now the easiest shot for me is that tank destroyer. Unfortunately the shot misses, and the great thing is because his elevation is not much different than mine, I can stay kind of away from the lip of the hill here and take shots. Now to get a shot on that VK heavy tank, I just had to move forward and crest the lip of the hill, which will also expose me to enemy fire. And as I move up here after I've reloaded, you can see he gets off a shot first, but he kind of rushed it, and his backside is facing toward me, so that's an easy penetration. And every time I move away from the crest of the hill here, they don't have a shot. And that right there is pretty much an ideal shot against that light tank. Only a sliver of my turret was exposed, so it's very unlikely he's going to penetrate me, but I get an open shot on him. So I'm continuing to work this side of the map. Really, there's so many open targets. I'm just going to stay here. It's just like kind of shooting fish in a barrel. And what's rough for these heavy tanks down below me is they could turn their turrets or they could back up and try to face me, but they can't help their exposure, right? I mean, all they could do is like kind of snuggle up close to the walls of the hill, but in that case, they really don't have much, offensive capability. They can only shoot targets that present themselves. Now, ironically, the IS on our side had said, don't push forward, let them come, and he had kind of wedged himself in between 3 or 4 enemy tanks, but we're providing such heavy cover fire from the top of hill that we're able to keep him alive. I go ahead and check again south. Now the thing on hill is if the enemy is to the south, if I'm spotting them from hill, for the most part their hulls are going to be facing toward me this early in the battle, and so in that case that E2 is fully hull down, so there's not going to be a lot of easy shots there. So I go ahead and swing over to the west side of the map, and there's the targets that are sitting out on the southwest aisle as well as targets that are just to the south of me around the corner. And here I'm being patient, there's no need to rush. And I'm watching what's happening now. If you look on the map, you can see that AMX-12T, my friendly light tank, just got hit and he's backing up. So, I had an awareness that he might get shot. And as soon as he comes up, I go ahead and create space for him. You don't want to block your teammates. And this Pershing pushes up around the corner. I clip him once, and then he dies to enemy fire. And then I hit a Super Pershing on the side. He's very exposed. And what's really tough for him, I move up so that the dead tank's turret is blocking his shot, and I hit him in his fully exposed side. He rushes a shot, but because I'm backing away as he fires, he's hitting my heavily angled hull armor, and then right there I tagged him through the front drive wheel to go ahead and track him so that my teammates can land some shots on him. Now inexplicably, this T-150, this friendly tank, was firing high explosive at this Super Pershing, but thankfully a Hellcat knocked him down so that he was easily one-shottable, and then I aimed just above his tracks to finish him off. So that the tracks wouldn't potentially eat the shell. Now, as I mentioned before, the great thing about hill is that you can choose when you're exposed and when you're not. So obviously right now there's a potential for tanks to be able to attack me we have a huge lead here. We're already up 10-3. And, normally I don't make videos of such face roll victories because generally in a face roll victory, the other side was particularly bad and your side was probably competent. But, this video really illustrates the importance of taking hill on a map like Mines. Now, there are maps where controlling hill isn't as big of a deal. So, for example, the West Hill in Prokhorovka, which, it's helpful to be able to spot targets from and fire on mid if you're on the hill. But the problem is there's very little in the way of hard cover. There's kind of a few grooves or trenches where you can hide your whole of your tank, but generally speaking, you're pretty exposed. Whereas, on this map, I can back up at any moment that I choose and completely eliminate any chance of them being able to hit me. Now, going back to that IS7 who made the comment earlier about let's just sit back, I think the hardest thing in this game is for players, once they've initially gone through the painful learning experience of getting wrecked by tanks they can't see, and this happens a lot to people in the first few hundred or first 1,000 battles, then the natural tendency is okay, I'm not going to drive out in the open, I'm going to sit back and let the enemy come to me. But the problem with this is that you're inactive for stretches of time, and that can lead to your team getting stuck in a deficit, which later you might deal late damage, but at that point the battle's already been decided. So I pick up a mastery badge here, I spot 8 tanks and kill several more, and obviously in a tier 8 battle this is pretty straightforward. So in my next video, episode 5, we're going to look at a T-44 but in a tier 10 battle, and I'll talk about how to contribute meaningfully even when your gun has poor penetration relative to the higher tier tanks that it's facing. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts and feedback. Take care.